So I tried to build my own dialog box components that would act much like the built-in JavaScript uh, dialog boxes. So what I'm talking about is, if you are familiar with the JavaScript alert, uh, confirm and prompt functions, then that is what I've tried to build on my own without relying on any other external libraries such as the mudblazor message box. So yeah, let's just quickly run some function here like this one. So this is what I'm referring to, this alert function that shows you a simple message with an OK button to close the message box. Okay, and then the other one would be the confirm function that would uh, show you or let you choose uh, between an option of either confirming whether yes or no to a message. So in this case, if you do the confirm function, then it would let you choose between OK or cancel. So if you choose OK, then it would return true, right? And if you choose cancel or just escape, press escape on your keyboard, then it would return false. Okay, and then the other one would be prompt function. So the prompt would be uh, a message box that allows you to uh, gather some input. Okay, how old are you? So for like in this case, so if you run this function, then it has a simple input box or text box that lets you enter an input. So basically it's everything, whether you place a number or a text, then it will just return as a text. Okay, so in this case, if you add an input and then click on OK, then it will return the value that has been inputted. Or else, if you don't enter anything or cancel from the prompt, that it will just return null. Okay, same thing if you escape on the press escape on your keyboard, then you end up with a null value. Okay, so first thing I did is, let's go through how I've accomplished this one is, I tried to just show a simple floating dialog box. Okay, now no other functionality other than just showing uh, a floating box on screen. Okay, so this one, by the way, this project is just a basic project template coming off from that Blazor web app project template. Okay, and so that's what I've used here. And then first off that I did is uh, here, let's me expand this one. So we're going to talk about how stuff that I've used here. So in this case, for this one, it's just a simple box that would show up on the screen when you click show dialog box. So here, let's just run this one so that you'll see or get an idea of how what I was trying to do here. So initially, when I was thinking of doing or showing a dialog box, so this is one, you have here this button. If you click this one, it will just simply show a green box, okay, with a text here. So how did I accomplish this one? So with this one, I started off with just a simple div here, div element that has several styles in it. Okay, so for this one, I've set the height and width of the box to specific dimensions, and then set the background color so that, yeah, it's noticeable, and then set the position as fixed since we want this one to uh, float on top of the other elements, and then set the location. For now, I've set the top and left positions into 0 so that it flash on the top left. Okay, and then the important attribute or property here is setting the z index. So I've set this as a number 999 or any higher value, which means that it would just float on top of the other uh, elements. Okay, and now the thing that allows us to show this box for, let's say, let's just refresh this one. Initially it's not shown, but when you click on the button it will show the green box by setting the display property. So first, initially when the home page or home component is loaded, I've set the property to none, and then when I click on the button which calls this function show dialog box, then I'll just set the display property or style to inherit, which would basically just show us a green box. So now I have some starting point where I can continue building up my dialog box. Okay, so let's stop this for a moment. Switch to the next thing that happened or I did for this one. So what I did with this one is to center the box. Okay, so let's look at here. So let's just check this one out. Let's check this out. Let's check this one out. Yes. Okay, and run application. Okay, now if we click this one, okay, let's just refresh. Okay, what's happening here? Uh, okay, so I think I haven't centered this one yet since, yeah, I've not applied, but let's move on. Let's stop this one. Let's go through a different uh, case here. Yeah, so before we proceed, so what I did with this one is, if you notice the show dialog box, so for us to find a way to center our green box, we need to find a way to uh, get the dimensions of the surrounding page itself. So we want to know the dimensions of this displayed page here. And so for us to do that, we just can't do that with just Blazor alone. So we have to rely on some JavaScript to get that data for us. So in this case, what I did is I've added a JavaScript function, a simple JavaScript function that would just pull or return the dimensions of the window that is being shown. In this case, all of this here. Okay, so it's a very simple uh, JavaScript function. Get windows dimensions, and it would return the uh, inner height and inner width as height and width respectively. Okay, so now that we can use uh, these values within our dialog box. Okay, so we haven't used it here yet. We just want to know if we can gather that data from JavaScript. So initially I thought that if it's possible to just create this dialog box without ever using any form of JavaScript, but somehow there's you just can't find a way because DOM is not available directly within uh, Blazor. So in that case, you have to use the JS interop. Okay, so in this case, we just inject the JS runtime. Then that would allow us to call any JavaScript functions within our Blazor application or Blazor code. So now uh, we can actually, let's add a breakpoint here, and if we click this one and then set the breakpoint here, we will see that if we inspect the window dimensions, we should see that we are getting the height and width value of our uh, page in general. Okay, so now with that in mind, we have already that we can use it to center our dialog box. Okay, so let's continue. Now that we have that function, we should be able to use that in our advantage to set or to center our dialog box. Okay, so now continuing, so here we try to use the values for the height and width as part of calculating the location of our dialog box. So basically a very simple uh, calculation here is that we get the overall dimension. For in this case, if we want to get the left position, we just find the width of the dimension divided by 2. So we cut it in half, and then we deduct the width of our dialog box, the half of it. Okay, and same thing for the top position. Okay, so now that we have that, we can use those dimensions to set the top and left positions of our dialog box. Okay, and also if you have noticed that I have added several classes here, or internal classes. So first would be this window dimensions, which would store the height and width coming up from our call to our JavaScript function. So we can, when we do JS runtime that invoke async, we pass a concrete class that would map to the values returned from our JSON call. I mean, a JavaScript function call. And then the other one would be the dialog box. So now, what happened here is that instead of having the styles for our dialog box inline in here uh, as a style, we just turned it into a class. Okay, so all of the values in our style for the dialog box is held by this class. So basically, we have all of those properties initially from here, from the style, set set it as the properties here, and then we have this uh, get property that would get the style as a styles. Okay, it will just concatenate all of our properties for our dialog box here. So in this case, that would allow us or give us the flexibility to set whatever settings that we want for our dialog box. Okay, so it's basically the same thing that we've placed it inline here, but now we've turned it into a class in an object. Okay, so now that we have that, if we run this one and if we click the button again, we go back here, let's continue, then it will show us the same green box, but now it's more better positioned at the center of our page. Okay, so let's try that again. Click this one, and now we have our green box centered in our page. Okay, now we are starting to build up our dialog box. Okay, so now moving on, next thing that I did is we need to add an overlay, something that covers the entire page, and then right on top of it is our dialog box itself. So what I mean by the overlay, so if you look at the example for mudblazor and their message box component, so let's see here. Okay, now we have this one sample here is click delete, then you see this some sort of gray area surrounding the actual dialog box. That is sort of an overlay that we can call. So it covers the entire page so that it centers our focus on the contents of the dialog box that we have. Okay, so now to do that, I've went through several ways of trying to accomplish this one, but I was having trouble with my very limited knowledge of CSS, very limited skill in doing CSS. So initially I was trying to nest uh let's see, I was trying to nest uh the actual dialog box itself within the overlay. Okay, so let's check this one out first. So now I ended up with doing this because initially when I tried to uh, put the overlay, put the dialog box itself within the overlay or nest it within the overlay, I was having trouble with the opacity, wherein if you set the opacity of the overlay, it would also affect the opacity of our dialog box itself. So with that, I don't know how to accomplish that way, because for me it's much more natural if you have this kind of uh, format wherein the dialog box itself is nested within our overlay. But somehow I'm having trouble with trying to set the opacity because it does affect our dialog box, so doesn't look good really. But I ended up with just having the overlay as a sibling of our dialog box. And then in that case, I've also set the style for the overlay in a different styling. Okay, so it's here, located here in our separate CSS file. So I've set the overlay much like with the dialog box itself, but with just slight difference in the z index. So it's much lower than the z index of our dialog box itself. Okay, so let's run this one, and we should see that if we click this one, now we have an overlay. Okay, so it's starting to look much like the mudblazor uh, message box. Okay, you can set the opacity of this one into much lighter value. Okay, but I think this would be enough for now as we slowly build up our uh, dialog box. Okay, now that we have that, next thing that we will do is this one. Since our dialog box itself looks so very uh, doesn't have any good form, so I've decided to use the built-in card design, or card what you call that, layout. Since by default the Blazor template uses Bootstrap, and so for Bootstrap I've used the card component, okay, to contain or design or lay out our dialog box. So this is what the card component looks like for Bootstrap. So now here you can have your header, your contents here, and then you can also have footer. So now you can design your uh, much like a dialog box. Okay, now you can have a header, a body, and a footer. So I've followed this approach, and then now looking at our dialog box here, we are now using the card component. We have our header, and then we have also added a close button that would close our dialog box, and then you have your some dummy placeholder body here. Okay, so let's just run this one to see what it would look like. So we click this one, and as you can see, it's starting to look like a dialog box or a message box. Okay, and then the close button does function in this case. So how does the close button function? So it's this one, it's mapped to this method, but basically what we did initially is uh, since we've shown the dialog box and set the display for the dialog box into inherit, then we just set it back into none. That would remove our dialog box on the screen. Okay, it's just very simple. Okay, cool. Now it's starting to look like a message box. So let's stop this now. Next thing that I did is uh, to make use of this base platform that we've already started to create and turn this into that individual you have the alert box, the confirm box, message box, and then the prompt message box. Okay, so what did I do for this one this time? Okay, let's look at this one. So now as you can see, I have turned everything that we did before and then turn it into a separate component. Now we have a dialog box component here. So this is the home page. What you can see now is totally different from what we've done before. Now we only have this dialog box component here, and then a very simple only one method here that would show the dialog box. So what happened to our dialog box? So I've placed it here under the shared folder. I've added a new component and then named it as dialog box and moved over the code from before into this component. Okay, now we have our separate dialog box component that we can now modify as much as we want. Like for now, we have the only one function, which is to show the dialog box. Now, if we run this again, it would function just as the same as before. So if we click this one, it will show us a simple message box or equivalent to the alert box. Okay, but this one isn't quite flexible yet, since the values or the uh, contents for our message box is hard coded here. Now we will do that next, since we have already moved our dialog box into its separate component. Now we can do much further, adding flexibility to this one. Okay, now if you notice here, let's inspect it a bit more here. Okay, the dialog box. Okay, now one thing that you have noticed is that for the show, since this is a synchronous method, we had to call the state has changed method, so that Blazor will be aware of re-rendering or updating our UI, since it's an asynchronous. So not Blazor would miss out on updating if you're doing asynchronous calls within your components. Okay, so one way to get your UI updated is to call the state has changed. Okay, so now moving on with that one, this one is where we've added a or allowed the user to pass in a custom content for our Blazor, our dialog box component. So now the changes that we did here is, let's see, here, okay, did I check this out? Okay, this one is checked out. Okay, so prior to that, what we did here is the child component. Initially, what I did was that pass in a custom content here. We've passed in the child content as a render fragment. Okay, so what would happen here is that setting the content of your message box is done through, so let's stop this one. You see it's empty because you can add content by doing this. Okay, so if you do this, so now this one, the contents inside our dialog box component will become the content of our dialog box. But somehow, for me, it's not quite flexible in this case, but because yeah, you have to add every time you call. You cannot do multiple calls to this dialog box without constantly changing data here. Okay, so that was initially what I did, and then quickly found out that yeah, that doesn't quite work like that way. Okay, so what I did next is, instead of doing that way, we would modify our show method to pass in the content or the message that we want to show on our dialog box. Okay, and so here we've now turned our dialog box to accept a message or pass in a message, and including a title to our message box. So now the show would be equivalent to the alert function on JavaScript. Okay, so here in our home example here, so now we have your show dialog box, and then we just show passing in the message and then the title of our dialog box. And then if we run this one to see how it would function, so if we click on this one, as you can see, we now can now pass in whatever message we want to show, and it also has this OK button to close our dialog box. Okay, it's basically the same as the close button here. Okay, so now we have our show dialog box that functions much like the JavaScript alert. Okay, now we're starting to uh, build up the functionalities of our message box. Okay, next thing that we have to do is uh, mimic or copy the confirm dialog box. Okay, so I did that here also, and now this one has become much like a very tricky part while doing this, because uh, I need to find a way to listen for the uh, clicking of the buttons. So in this case, so let's just run this first to see what it would look like. Okay, so now here you would call the confirm dialog box by doing this. Okay, focus on this one, line 27. Now you can pass in again your message and then the title, but then once you either click OK or cancel, it would return a value. That that value would be a Boolean type that would return the value depending on if you click OK, it would return true. If you click cancel, it would return false. Much like the confirm JavaScript confirm function. Okay, so initially I was having trouble on how to uh, like listen for the uh, OK and cancel button events, because I don't know how, because of my very limited knowledge of threading and tasks within the C sharp. uh, uh, Due to my desperation, I had to ask Copilot. In this case, I didn't go with ChatGPT, but I've used Copilot. Ask it if how I could accomplish that for listening in click events, but uh, being sort of like in an asynchronous way. Okay, so what does that mean? So in this case, here we have a bit of a change here. So this is our show confirm box method. Now what happened here now is that the action buttons are actually being created dynamically or being rendered dynamically, because we are using the same dialog box uh, layout, but we just want to change the what type of action buttons or buttons are shown depending on uh, the type of dialog box that we show. For the alert box, a simple OK button, which in this case is being set here. Okay, and then the confirm, for the confirm box, we show two button options, which is the OK and the cancel. So that here we try to add it here dynamically. Okay, and then I did some organizing. So the center dialog box is both being used in these methods, so I've just moved them into our separate methods. And then one thing to take note here is that what Copilot suggested is to make use of the task completion source class. Okay, now what happens is if we use this one, it would allow us to wait or sort of like listen to the calls to this object. Okay, so what happens is that if, before we when we show the confirm box, we would wait for any click event that would happen, either clicking the OK button or the cancel button. Now with the OK button, it calls this confirm function. Now it will inside of that is we will call the uh, click task. So in this case, this is the variable which is of type task completion source, which would, if we set it to true, which would come back here as a return type. Okay, so forgive me, I'm not quite I don't have that quite of a skill of trying to explain that threading part of this uh, stuff, but yeah, that's what Copilot suggested me, and it does work in this case. So now when you click on the confirm, we will sort of emit a value to click task. So any code that waits for the that click task uh, event would get the result, okay, which in this case either if we click on confirm, it would return true, and if we click close, it would return false, which in turn we will return to the caller. So in this case, this would be returned as either true or false. Okay, now if we show confirm dialog box, now you have two buttons. You can either cancel or OK, or equivalent to yes or no. Okay, if we hit the OK button and check the console here, we can see that if it returned true. Okay, let's try this again, and this time let's click cancel, then it would return false. So basically it functions much like the confirm function of JavaScript. Okay, so it seems like we're starting to uh, move functions from JavaScript to uh, Blazor using this type of component. Okay, now after that, the last thing that I did is again the uh, prompt, the prompt function. Remember, the prompt function would be this one, right? If you run the prompt function from JavaScript, it will allow you to enter a value or receive value from the user. Okay, and then yeah, whatever value you will enter, it will return. Okay, so now with that one, it's now much easier since I've already solved the problem of listening for click events uh, in an asynchronous way. So with the show prompt box function here, which shows our prompt box, it has the almost the same as what we did with confirm, but with a slight addition of now our dialog body is being set as a render fragment. So now the render body is uh, no longer just a string. Okay, it's now also a render fragment, which allows us to set contents dynamically. Okay, now with this one we only need to have one layout for our dialog box, but we can use it again with our three functions here. It's with the show one or the alert one. We can set the dialog body as simple as this one, and then the confirm box, again just a simple message. And now with the prompt box, we've added an input. Okay, so there's two things that we've added here. We have added the message and then the input box that would allow us to receive input from the user. Again, waiting for our confirm task here. And now the additional condition or logic here is that if we have confirmed it as or click the OK button, but we have never placed any value on it, we just return an empty. So we don't return, instead of if you follow here on the prompt with the built-in JavaScript prompt, if you don't enter anything, it would just return as an empty string. Okay, so in this case we just return an empty string, or else well, we will return the value that has been uh, inputted. Okay, so now let's run this example, and now we have the show prompt dialog box button here. If we click this one, okay, it should allow us to accept input from the user. If we input something and we click OK, let's see here. As you can see, we have returned the value of 12. Okay, show something. If you click OK but without entering any value, it would just return with nothing, empty. Same thing, if you click cancel, it would just return nothing or just an empty string. We don't want to return nulls. Okay, so as to prevent any further complications of whatever client you're using, using your prompt function. Okay, so yeah, I think that covers pretty much what I did with this one. Okay, there could be some things that we can improve or maybe do a little different here, especially with what I did with using this task completion source as suggested by Copilot. One thing is I'm not quite sure if this would be efficient enough or good enough, or it won't have any side effects of using this within our dialog box component. But yeah, please let me know if there's no harm in doing this one. Okay, and so yeah, one thing also is that the limitation for this one is that if you add content that is quite long, it doesn't quite center it correctly. Okay, so what does I mean by that? So let's see. Okay, let's try adding some long content here. Okay, let's just add a break. I don't know if this would, if you would see what I mean here. It's just a test. Okay, show dialog box. Okay, let's click this one. It's not quite working. Yeah. I think it's because, yeah, I think the message is just added as a string. But okay, now okay, I know. Let's just modify this quickly. Okay, instead of putting that here, okay, add it here. So this is what I meant by this one. Save this also. Okay, if we click this one, it's not updating correctly. Let's retry again. Okay, where did I add that one? It's show confirm box. Okay, let's just show confirm box. Okay, as you can see, if you have quite a long or content or message that it doesn't quite center it correctly, it should be like up above here in this section instead of way low down here. So maybe what we can do for to improve this one is, prior to showing this one, we need to have or to get the actual dimension of this dialog box itself, and then pass it on to the calculating the top and left portion of our uh, dialog box. Okay, all right, so I guess that wraps up our episode for today. And yeah, please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel to get updated with our latest videos. And yeah, I hope to see you soon, everyone, and have a wonderful day.